standing out. But again, it's important because as we laid out earlier, that the way that the industry is going towards events, how all these other great new events that are starting to pop up and everything, they're still relatively new, but we already know what the direction is going to go into. So it really comes down to whether you're deciding to move in that similar direction and become one of the first to do something like this. Because if you plant the tree now, or this is the best time to plant the tree, like today, right now, opposed to sometime down the road, because whatever fruit it's bear, it's going to come sooner if you plant it now than later. There's my quick analogy to sum all that up. So I can stop my rant.
That was excellent. I wholeheartedly agree with most, if not all, of what you said. So
awesome. So yeah, I mean, just a lot of good things coming out, and of how this change, how COVID, if anything, just really pressed fast forward on everything. And I know we opened up with E3. It's to say I think that E3 is still going to have its place and everything, but as Mustapha has been laying out, it's just now changing that direction. The attention is really now shifting, and for some entities it can be harder to make those changes, and for others it's easier. And that's the thing I want to say too. Usually when entities are really big, it's hard to like stop the big machine that's always churning and then flip on a dime or stop on a dime and change direction and pivot, right? And when I say easy, it's not to say it's not a lot of work, but for people that are listening to this show, you have probably a lot more opportunities than you think to make these kinds of shifts on your own. It might seem like a real challenge to do that type of stuff, but if it's a focus of yours or something like that, it's a lot easier now than it does when you get bigger, generally speaking. And sometimes it can be easier as your team grows and everything else to make those things happen. But the point being is you're in a really great position to make some cool things happen on some of these fronts that we're talking about. And again, it's just a way to stand out. And if that's not a focus for you, then looking at these new types of events and still having some form of collaboration is going to really help you stand out a bit more. All right, we talked about a lot, but let's kind of like wrap things up a little bit here. So, importance of events. Now that they're becoming, we're seeing them going into a more digital format and everything else. How important would you say events are moving towards the future?
events are always going to be important, at the very least because of the network. But I would say they're always going to be essential. But I don't think we're ever going to experience this kind of almost monolithic structure where it's like E3 is the big gamer moment of the year and that's it. I think we're definitely going to be veering away from that, and I see the future of events in the industry as being a real expansion on that idea. I think it's going to be, we're going to get a little bit of something every so often all year round. That's what I anticipate. We might still have some events that are bigger than others, but yeah, it's definitely going to start branching out, I think, where it's still going to be as important, but it's going to be kind of shared over the course of a year rather than, all kind of crammed within 1 week.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a better way to go about it. Honestly, it's not, it's really by choice of these creators of events, right? It's not like one person dictating when events are going to go, or it's just one season. So yeah, that would be really cool. Now, and what do you think too in terms of just events as a whole? As you think indie games? I mean, yes, it's becoming still more prominent force. I mean, we see big publishers that are even making games that are more like indie or work, things like that. But you think that's going to continue to be more on the forefront?
Yes, and one thing that really kind of tipped me off to that was the fact that Nintendo during their direct announced that they're bringing back Advance Wars, which was a game series
Mm.
developed by Intelligent Systems back in the Game Boy Advance era, so some time ago. But the remake is being done by WayForward, which is actually a
Ah,
smaller.
yep.
So, stuff like that, stuff like the revival of Streets of Rage, I believe that was also an indie studio that did that. Remakes and remasters of classic games being done by smaller studios indicates to me that that's something we might be seeing familiar faces getting tapped on the shoulders to do far more often. In addition to that, events like Nintendo has their indie showcase. Xbox, I think, has a pretty heavy indie focus. Even EA publishes a lot of smaller studios games, so I think it's inevitable. AAA is just going to keep becoming bigger budget, harder to make
Yeah.
in short windows of time, and there have to be other games than the big blockbuster once a year. So
Yeah.
I
No,
think it is inevitable that indie games will kind of start for these types of events.
yeah, because no longer cuz let's go back to like I don't know, like 15 years ago when AAA was like the main one of the main leading forces and stuff in terms of again providing for the demand of people, right? But now that there's all these other all this other content available for people to play to consume, um, and the cost associated with creating that content is far less than what's required from a AAA studio, which makes sense. I mean, and not only that, I mean, your examples of all these other indie studios that are doing these remakes and stuff. I mean, think about it. They're like you guys as developers listening to this. Or it's like even though it might feel like it's taking forever to make your game and stuff again like a lot of games can be made once, especially after you make your first one. The time it takes to make them is going to be far should be far shorter, or not far shorter, but will be shorter, should be shorter than the first time, and then you can get better and get more efficient and everything. And these big companies are realizing this. It's smaller team for them, it's smaller dollars, and then they still have the big platform to reach directly um, to this audience, and probably I don't know what type of margins that they're not necessarily. I'm sorry, not margins, but profits that they get overall. It's going to be far more profitable for them to now work with indie teams. So you see how all this is dynamic. We're talking about events, but everything is just still going like going back to indies and just how much more prominent you guys and whether it's a small studio or big studio or bigger studio are really coming into play into this whole industry. It's really exciting stuff. And I don't know. I just think it's super cool. And again, I love the examples you provided and identifying how indie games as a whole are definitely going to be more on the forefront and will continue to do so in more ways than just the games for players, but also for the industry as a whole. All right, and last but not least, Mustafa, what kind of things we showcase some stuff that we liked from just using Wholesome Direct as an example, but what kind of things would you like to see in the future games, industry and shows and events in terms of like format or what they're sharing or anything along those lines?
Yeah, so I would say from like an industry perspective, um, I would certainly say generally just more diversity of content.
Mm.
One thing that kind of bums me out year over year watching E3 is that a lot of the AAA games are shooters, and
Yep.
as someone who's like, and I'm not saying this from like a ethics angle because I have no problem with like violence in video games or anything like that. But as someone who's just not too keen on the genre, like who doesn't find it that fun, I hate seeing a premise that's really exciting and unique and characters using magic and all of this stuff. And it's like, oh, well, it's still a first person shooter. And it's like, come on, like, we could do more. We could create more diverse mechanics. So that's something I would like to see is just diversity of content, different types of games, more different types of games. Uh, speaking from a personal angle, the types of games I would like to see, I think party games are a super underrated genre.
Mm.
I think, um, you know, you get like Jackbox and then, like Mario Party. But party games, for the most part, are not a hugely celebrated genre, which I think is kind of a bummer.
Yeah, no, I could see that. I'm just trying to think for me, like it's really interesting. Yeah, I don't know of a particular type of game or genre of game I would like to see more of, but I think some of that diversity is really good too. Because, well, one, to kind of somewhat answer or provide, I guess, an idea of an answer for the first person shooter stuff for AAA. I think a lot of that too is they're basically going again off of stats and what is demand. I mean, look at like the sales of games like Call of Duty and all that stuff. They're just up there, so everybody's trying to like get into that piece of the pie of that market share, right? To an extent. But on the flip side, I like you're just because you play a first person shooter doesn't mean you're only going to play first person shooters like all the time or whatever, right? So having that diversity, I think what especially if there are certain player behaviors that they really to identify, and if other genres of games can tap into that, that could be a more or a better way of diversifying things, but still meeting the bottom lines. I'm talking more in a very bigger, like maybe AAA fashion here. I could be completely wrong in what I'm saying, but that's just my thought. And then, but in general, so that I think would be cool on the bigger corporation AAA side of things. And then on a smaller scale, though, yeah, just seeing events that are really focused and catered to diversifying even specific genres. Like we talked about it briefly earlier, just having events that are or just collaborations of people really showcasing one type of a game, and then just having all these different creators coming up with awesome different takes on that genre and mechanics and everything else. I mean, that is something I'm really looking forward to seeing. And not only that, I think having things catered in that fashion is just going to make things so much easier and better for players that are looking for those types of experiences, don't know where to get it, and then having something that really showcases certain specific genres in a positive, friendly light and really get everything like aggregated content in a good manner. Because you know what, you have influencers that are doing this now already, but I think if we see more of this type of activity among the creators themselves, not just influencers and other events, players are going to get what they want essentially, and not just get what they want, but find something new and exciting. So that's what I'm really looking forward to is all these new possibilities and opportunities that exist out there for game creators. All right, man. Well, that was a lot. We really appreciate you guys tuning into this particular episode, and hopefully we gave you some ideas to consider moving forward in the future when it comes to either considering events or collaborations or anything else. Mustapha, anything you would like to add to our closing here?
I would apologize in advance for going off the cuff a little bit, but also like if there's anything that kind of raises an eyebrow on the events front about anything that we mentioned, feel free to communicate with us if there's any ideas that you have that you'd like to see signal boosted or have further interest in discussing with us further as well. We're at the very least always open to conversation. So
yeah, definitely. And probably the best way to do that would be just tweet at us. We see it. It's just at IGM Podcast on Twitter. So love to hear from you. Let us know what you think. And as Mustapha said, we're always open to conversation. And who knows if it's something really good and you have a good stance on and stuff. maybe it could open up, you being on the show and having that conversation here. So again,